Welcome back to the Contractor Growth Show, the podcast for contractors, small business owners, and people in the trades, or as they call them across the pond, tradies, people who want more than just a job. This show's about growth and real growth, better systems, better sales, better leadership, better marketing, building a great business that actually works for you instead of one that owns your life. I'm John, the Contractor Growth Guy, founder of Growthscapes. I've spent years in construction, in sales, and business development, helping contractors grow, and not just by getting more leads, but by helping build stronger businesses from the inside out. The truth is, most contractors aren't losing because they can't do the work. It's everything else. They're losing because of pricing problems, weak systems, poor follow-up, bad marketing, staffing headaches. Oh, that's a big one right there for everybody. And the constant chaos that comes from trying to run everything by yourself. This show exists really to have honest conversations about those problems. That's really why we're here. No corporate fluff, no fake guru nonsense, and just real talk really about what actually works in the real world of being a contractor. Sometimes that means solo episodes where I break down hard truths contractors need to hear. And sometimes it means bringing on people who are out there doing it at a high level. People who've built real businesses, made hard decisions, survived expensive mistakes, and learned lessons worth sharing. Today is actually one of those conversations. And I'm going to be talking to, just here in a moment, Jake Stoddard from Fenceworks, the north end of Chicago, better known and now to be nationally famous as the guy on 41. This is a business that's got real deep roots, founded in 1967 by Jake's grandfather and built into a recognized name in the region through decades of hard work, smart decisions, and obviously very good branding. What makes this conversation especially valuable is that Jake represents to us that balance that I think many of us struggle with between legacy and innovation. Maybe you do, maybe you don't. Okay. He's part of a third generation helping lead the business forward. A lot of changes take place from 1967 to now. So he's taken a company from fencing and expanded it into several other offerings, basketball hoops, trampolines, playsets, and a whole lot more, and a much bigger customer experience. Jake understands both the old school side of contracting from having been raised in the business, and yet the modern reality of growth through systems and through digital marketing particularly, and customer education and strategic business decisions. So we're going to talk about the dynamics of a family business. We're going to talk a little bit about pivots, mistakes, marketing, leadership, a whole bunch of things, wide ranging. We're going to keep it kind of loose. We're going to talk about what separates companies that stay stuck from companies that actually grow. So if you're a contractor trying to move from just being an operator to becoming a real business owner, this is going to be a great conversation for you. So let's get into it. Jake, welcome to the program. Thanks for joining us. And
Thank you for having me, John.
yeah, I've been looking forward to this very much. So let's launch right into it. Where did the guy on 41 come from? How did that become such a powerful? And I understand you're actually not on 41 anymore.
That is true. That is true. Yeah. So yeah, happy to dive into that. So, our company name is Fenceworks. We are now located in Northbrook, Illinois, a North Shore suburb of Chicagoland.
Okay.
But for decades, we were located in Highland Park, just down the street, but on a busy highway known as Route 41 for decades. So started in 1967, had a couple small location move arounds in the beginning, but really situated ourselves for over 50 plus years in 5 decades in Highland Park on Route 41. And again, we're Fenceworks and always have been, but the name, the guy in 41, really is in the location itself, but kind of got coined by a little guy named Michael Jordan of the Chicago Bulls back in the 90s. We did a basketball hoop for him. And, my grandfather ran into him randomly in California on a trip. And Michael Jordan noticed my grandfather at the hotel and pointed out to him, "Hey, that's the guy in 41."
Wow,
And
that's so cool.
that paired with just people coming in and referring to us, it kind of stuck, and now we kind of go hand in hand. Some people from the area, if you grew up in this area in Chicago, you know us maybe as the guy in 41, others Fenceworks, so interchangeable, but go by both. So that's kind of the origin of that. Yeah.
Very good. And you're the guy on 41, third generation, the guy on
Yes,
41,
sir.
number three. Very good.
Trying to. That's the goal.
So,
Yeah.
without getting into too much of the weeds of the long history of your business, but your grandfather started, I'm assuming, with fencing back in 1967,
Correct.
and now you've made some major pivots, basketball hoops, trampolines, play sets, more. What were the biggest pivots in your service offerings, and what made you, or was it you or your father that made those pivots? What made you realize those changes were necessary? What was it that drove those pivots?
Yeah, absolutely. So, yeah, absolutely. We started as a fence company in 1967. It was just my grandfather. He was working for another local company and said, you know what, I can do it, better myself. And just one of those guys that didn't want to work for someone else. Just that's how he's kind of built.
Right,
And you started with fencing, and then come the mid 90s, kind of looked at the market and said, hey, look, there's not really a place in the Chicagoland area where there's you can get a place at a basketball hoop and a trampoline. It was kind of a huge question mark for many families. So it started with his own kids and soon to be grandkids. Hey, where can I get something quality that is not off of a shelf,
right,
that I
yeah,
can have a showroom? So that's kind of there was a need for it and an openness in the market and a personal desire to do that for himself, and then turned it into a business. And now we're fences is still predominantly the largest portion or sector of our business
right.
aside. And then it's basketball hoops, playgrounds, trampolines, but that's it, right? We stop there. We're very
Okay,
specialized in those four spaces.
yeah, okay, very good. Sorry, what year did you say that was? Maybe you didn't say what year that was that
Again,
we
hard
did
to
that.
pinpoint the exact year, but the pivot or the addition of these additional offerings in playgrounds, basketball hoops, and trampolines was around the early to mid 90s.
Oh,
So a
okay,
little
yeah,
over 30 years.
I can see that for sure. Yeah. It's very much been a much bigger trend. I mean, before that, kids ran the neighborhoods, right? And
Exactly.
now, when I was growing up, I was in high school. I graduated high school in the early 90s, and I mean, the front yard basketball hoop was the center point of the neighborhood
Right.
oftentimes, right? So, um, yeah, very interesting. Um, I was going to ask you, um, speaking of that specialty in that area, it seems to me, just off the top of my head, that would be a very competitive space. Maybe it wasn't in 1991 or 1992, but the big box stores have all jumped on board with packaged solutions for that. Talk to me a little bit about the challenges associated with that, perhaps, and how you steer through that and past that, because you're continuing to offer that, and I'm assuming that it's still a successful component of your business. How do you navigate that? Well, must be quite a challenge. And how do you position yourself?
Sure. No, very good question. So regarding the playset basketball hoop and trampoline space, compared to the 90s, nowadays, the Google search, when on the first page is bombarded by, yes, the big box stores, the franchises, companies with, again, as successful as we have been over, the last, almost 60 years, there are these big box stores and franchises that have a much more vast or larger marketing budget that we will never be able to compete with, right? So
Right.
you,
Yeah.
as a small family business, we have to be creative. When we were on Route 41, we were in a much higher traffic area right off the highway. People drove by us, our play sets, our basketball hoops, our trampolines, and our fences were outside. You couldn't miss us. So it was almost like having a standing billboard, at all
Right.
times.
Yeah.
So that was, now that we've moved over to our new location here in Northbrook since about 2018, give or take, We're now indoors in an industrial park, and it's great. People can come and test our products year round, but we've lost the visibility.
Right.
The name is still there and our branding is still there, and we need to, ensure that we continue that legacy and remind people that, hey, we're still here. We're just not, in our original location. And people may get confused. Oh, the guy on 41. Well, you're not on 41. Well, it's hard to drop something that, you're so used to. And my
Yeah.
grandfather, now 86,
Yeah.
still comes in the office every day and loves what he does. And it's inspiring to me and want to make him proud every day. But ultimately, yes, to compete with the big box and the franchises and these larger marketing budgets, we have to get creative and through social media and putting my face out there and educating people through content and
Right.
letting them
Yeah.
know, hey, you don't have to deal with the online hours of research and AI and all that. There's a local family business down the street. There's not a call center. When you're wanting something, you can text me, you can call me, you can come into the showroom. We're not a faceless brand. We stand behind our work, and most families, once they're aware that this exists, and mind you, if you grew up in the area, you may know who we are, but if you didn't, you moved from out of state, whatever it may be, when people find out that this exists, this local option, it's hard not to at least explore it and start with us. And
Right.
we're very
Absolutely.
fortunate for that.
Well, and you're obviously not able to, I mean, I think it's safe to say you're not able to compete on price. So, but you're obviously competing on value, right?
Correct. And people know that, right? When you come in here, and it's not to say yes, maybe up front you can go to a big box store or something that might be delivered on your doorsteps and five, few 100-pound boxes, and then you have to go find a guy working out of his garage or some nationally dispatched installation service to put together what's something that your kids, your friends, your kids' friends, your family, there's a lot of liability involved. And typically,
Absolutely.
right,
Yeah.
you may want to buy that. Some people buy that up front and then find out later they're having to buy it again. And when they could have just started the first time, buying right the first time,
Yeah.
and getting something their kids can grow into. So yes, the short term, lower cost option ends up most times than not becoming a long term headache and financially more expensive, economically speaking.
So let's jump off with a lesson here to our listeners because this is something that I preach and preach and preach and preach. And yet I'm still on a weekly basis bombarded by contractors who face this struggle. And some of them have not bought into this whole idea of value over price, right? So a little bit of a rant here from me, Jake. Just bear with me a little bit
Sure.
because it's a constant thing, and your story is a good illustration of this fact. Taking sales training 25, well, it had to have been 25 years ago. I didn't have kids, and my oldest is 24. So taking sales training, I got a lesson one day I never forgot. And I never forgot this line that when the value exceeds the price, you've made the sale. And what I'm getting to is this, that there's a price conscious component that thinks that the most important thing in the market is price. And it is not true. It is a myth. If it were true, you would never sell a playset. Am I correct? Can I get an amen, Jake?
Amen.
It just wouldn't happen, right? And so this is another example of the fact that price is not the most important thing. So to my contractors in my audience or any service providers in my audience, don't fight to be the bottom price. First of all, you'll never accomplish that, not likely. And if you do, you'll go broke trying. Okay. Don't do it. So, Jake, thank you for that great example because I'm always looking for living examples of sell value, 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 value. It's actually, have you ever, I don't know if you've ever heard this, Jake, but there's actually there was a study done recently, and I wish I could put my finger on it that said that price is most often the third highest priority in a consumer buying decision. Third, not first, not even second, it's third, right? So that's why you guys are selling against much lower priced competitors. Now, you mentioned too your digital marketing content, that kind of thing. Um, you're a younger guy, okay? I'm not going to tell my audience how old you are, even though I know. We'll keep that secret between us. But you're a younger guy, much younger than I am, okay? So you grew up in a more of a digital world than your father and your grandfather. Now we could
Sure.
have a whole discussion about how their understanding of what you're doing with that, but you obviously realized that had to be a serious part of the business. Have you seen the impact of that over just relying on your reputation and your referrals and how that actually feeds your referral business?
Yeah, it's interesting. I will say definitely the younger generation of families. Now, if we're to put personas, if you want to call it, on, who our customer base is, I will say it's, you know, young families that are moving to the suburbs and have young children
Yep,
and, just, babies that, again, they're buying these products knowing it's going to be a 20 plus year investment. They're going to get their bang for buck out of it and the value over the long term. Second to that would be the grandparents, funny enough, right? Where
interesting. Yep,
they want to, give their grandkids, the world. And
yep,
great to us, right? The grandparents, that age group grew up and remembered us on 41 and know of us in this area. So when their kids ask, hey, we're ready for, a play set, a basketball hoop, a trampoline, or even a fence, right? They just moved into a new home. It might be a fixer-upper, or it's just they need a new fence, may have you. It's Chicago. We have high winds here. Things happen. People need new fences. They'll go to their parents, right? And we're grateful that we've built up that reputation for all those years that we may be that first person that their parents bring up. Hey, you got to go visit the guy in 41, the
right.
local
Yep.
family business. So yes, I would say the younger generation, you call it the lead generation per se, of how they're getting to us is yes, either through the digital channels on social media and seeing someone like myself that they find maybe relatable around their age and feel like they're being talked to, not at, per
Right.
se, and
Yep.
where or they're getting the recommendation from their parents. And there's a lot of listing websites, the to not name names, but there's some listing websites that are flooded with sponsored ads and flooded by just complaints and or other things, and it's a very clouded space. So
Yeah.
ultimately, yes, that referral, that recommendation, whether it's from an internal family member, a friend, a group they're involved with, uh, that's why every single job we ensure that we do our best and always, leave the job knowing it's done correctly and in the right way so that our name gets continued to be mentioned in those conversations when it
So,
comes
so
up.
what platforms are you do focus on most when it comes to social media? What would be
Sure.
your top three, I guess?
Sure. I would say, we've had accounts, from other family members that have been through the business, but we really truly started, myself with Instagram. By far
Yeah.
none, I find that to be where, 90% plus of our market is on. We haven't really gotten into TikTok yet or have started that. Facebook, I would say, Facebook groups are huge
Yeah.
and definitely tends to lean or older
Right. Yeah.
demographically.
Yeah.
But Instagram, there's not really an age demographic hindrance. It's across the board. So Instagram has been my number one for sure, and then the
Interesting.
others we really haven't tapped into fully yet, or might not, but we'll see.
Yeah, and it is such a demographic game too. And you obviously know your demographic, your buyer demographic, which is so critically important. Um, what would you say? I'm going to shift gears here a little bit and
Sure.
just talk to you about some of the challenges that you face. Like, I'm probably got a lot of people in my audience that are, they're starting out or their first generation, hoping to build a business to pass down to their kids. You're at the other end of this, right?
Mhm.
And you're third generation. That doesn't mean that it is not without that it's without challenges. You have
Sure.
day-to-day challenges. What would you say are some of the biggest challenges that your company faces right now? Because this is what I love. I love talking to businesses as old as yours that are still growing. Okay. And a lot of people think, oh, if I ever get to that point, I'll just kind of coast. You can never coast, right? Uh, and I know that from having talked to you earlier prior to this interview, that you're not in coasting mode, right? What are the big challenges that you're facing as your business grows? How are you attacking those problems? Is it staffing? Is it systems? I know we talked about systems before, and that's been a conversation. Is it profit margins? Is it your competition operations? What is it that keeps you up at night?
Yeah, great question. So, at least from my standpoint, right, and my main roles here at our company is running our playground, basketball, trampoline departments, and our marketing. And I know I've touched on it a bit, but I would reiterate, as leading our marketing efforts here, it's yes, competing with, on the fence side, there's a handful of, private equity backed or franchise based, fence companies that have,
Yeah,
great marketing tactics and know how to market. Can't speak on their labor and their service in itself. And then in the playset basketball trampoline space, it's pretty heavily, weighted, at least in the Google search, game per se in search, with the big box and the franchises. So yes, competing for space when yes, the consumer who yes doesn't get a referral from a friend and is just everyone, no matter what, if you have a referral, I think everyone with AI and with the power that they have in their hands with their mobile devices and their phones is I can search whatever I want when I want, and the access to information, the speed at which people can gather information, especially with AI, you can really scan the internet faster than ever before.
right,
So with that said, yes, standing out and getting our message that hey, we are different, we are unique, we are not a franchise, we are a single family owned and operated business here,
yeah,
and no one else can say that in this area. So yes, the number one challenge is trying to, again, leverage our ethos, our narrative as a business and who we are and standing out amongst the clouded, uh, you know, surge of these bigger companies that have the ability to get in front of the people on their phones a bit at larger scale.
right.
So that's the number
Okay.
one challenge.
Interesting. So I want to ask you this. You highlighted the fact that you focus mostly on the sale of those certain products. And while there's an install component to that, I know, and a service component to it, um, a lot of our listeners are like out in the field constantly. They don't have a retail location. They don't have a showroom. They're out
Sure.
working. So talk to me about what you know about the fencing side of the business. Talk about the challenges that you know happen, even though I know that's not your kettle of fish. That's a terrible expression, whatever that means. I don't know who cooks fish in a kettle, but anyway, I know it's not your cup of tea. There we go. How's that? It's not your cup of tea, but you must know obviously some of the goings on that side of the business. There's staffing issues, there's scheduling, all that kind of stuff. Talk to me about those challenges. Like how have you, I know when we talked prior to this interview, you talked about the challenges surrounding systems and how that you're not there yet. But talk to me about those challenges a little bit. Some of the logistical
Yeah.
challenges beyond marketing.
For sure, absolutely. So I would say, again, from what I'm exposed to, and I will say my uncle, my grandfather, my father, definitely are more heavily involved in the fence side of the business. But as third generation, it's my job to, learn as much as I can across all of our areas, so that I'm as well rounded as possible when that time comes,
Yeah,
down the road. But with all that said, I think. You know, we have very high standards for our crews that have been with us for many years, many for decades.
yeah,
And as business is growing, we want to keep our lead times down, right? That goes from our estimators that we don't do satellite quotes, right? People will call and say, hey, I have 300 linear feet of space to work with. I want a wood, a vinyl, a composite, a chain link quote. What's my price range going to be? And we tell them, look, we don't give ranges over the phone, and it's not because we don't for any other reason than it's doing you and ourselves a disservice, right? Because
right.
at the end of
Yeah,
the day, our job is custom, right?
yeah,
So if we were to have some of these companies out there, we'll do like a fence calculator, for example, and people will be tied to that number. And then when it actually comes the job, all these hidden pop-up costs come out because their terrain was different than they noted in their upfront inquiry,
Yeah.
or this tree and this property line, and you name the excuse or the, insert any sort
Right.
of
Sure.
barrier
Yeah.
involved,
Absolutely.
and it causes headaches and causes customers frustration, and we understand that and we see that. So when we say maybe some people may consider it being difficult, or hey, we may be 3 weeks out until we can come out and even estimate your job. It's, hey, if you're in a call company and they could see you tomorrow, that sounds great. But, especially in a busy season, the spring rush here, when people are trying to all get, call at once, there's a good reason why we may be a couple weeks until we come see it. It's because people
Oh,
trust us, and, we could hire more sales guys and, people to go out and estimate. We could hire more crews, but there's a quality over quantity, standpoint that we're going to stand behind. Is, and of course, if that unicorn comes around and there's, another great crew out there we can bring on board, or another estimator when that time comes, of course we want to see people faster and get the fences installed faster, but we're not going to do it at the disservice of the customers,
see,
and we're not going to sacrifice that quality. So that is
great.
probably the number one thing logistically, or at least labor wise. And then more on the logistical side, I would say it's, with customers, right? We're not going to, we want to leverage technology, but we don't want to hire an AI bot to be, at our office when you call to make a lead. We want
Correct.
you to
Yeah.
talk to a real person, whether it's my
Yeah.
grandmother or someone else here. So that personable touch, while it may be maybe not as efficient,
Yeah.
it's something we don't want to lose. So I would say those, at least on the fence side, are the number, one and two things that I would say are challenges at this time.
Well, and you've highlighted a few things there that are so good. One of the ones, and I'll use this is another teachable moment to our audience. It is always a concern if if a contractor says I can start on Monday, like step back, Mr. Consumer, and think about that. How good is a contractor that's that slow at a busy time of the year that he can pop out, right? Just so quickly. There's a very important component we need to appreciate more, and that is the idea of being oversubscribed, right? Have more demand for our services than we're able to supply. There's two reasons at least why that's important. I think you'd agree with this, Jake. One
Mhm.
is it sends a message to customers, we're busy and we're busy for a reason. You don't have to
Mhm.
say that. That's the message that they will get, right?
Sure.
The second one, I would say is um, that you're busy, but it's also now I forget exactly what I was going to say. Isn't that terrible? Anyway, that's one. Being oversubscribed is very, very important, right? Oh, I know what it was. 50-year-old brain late in the afternoon. That's what happens, guys. Sorry to any of my younger listeners. That's what's going to happen to you. Being oversubscribed. The other thing is there's this tendency to want to grow as quickly as we get pushed to grow. And then what we have to do sometimes is go into debt to do that. And you're an established company, so you're probably not in that situation. But for a lot of my listeners that are starting out, let your business, let the demand push you and make sure it's sustained before you get into adding infrastructure to your business to handle demand that may not last, right? You guys have been at it long enough, right, Jake?
Right.
That you get that. And experience probably has taught your father, uncle, grandfather, and even you by extension, the importance of that.
Yeah. I think, and John, I think I can add something there, just at least
Sure.
from my experience when I first started. And I actually, quick backstory is, I didn't start off right away out of college, coming into the family business. I actually started in consulting. I was in product management, working on digital products like websites and apps, and didn't want to join the family business right away. Mind you, I grew up in it. I was in the yards in the summers working, so I had a good, baseline knowledge of the business and, how, the inner workings of it. But right away, I wanted to bring some value back, which was this digital component, and knew the timing would kind of line up right, and it did about, a little over 3.5 years ago. But when I first started, especially on the sales side of things, and working with families. I think I wanted to make every sale, right? I think when someone called, even if it was out of scope, I found a way. I tried to make it work. And what I found was, that's not always the right thing. I think when you
Right.
start off in a business and you're starting off, whether it's in sales or just overall in contracting in general, is you may want to get every job. You want to get your name
Right.
out there. You want to
Yeah.
prove to yourself and everyone that, you can do it. And you got to stick to your guns. You got to stick to what you know. And no one wants it's sometimes, again, there are companies out there that will take on every job, and that's
Yeah.
not for everyone. So
Yeah.
that would be my lesson to my, from what I learned from myself, and what I'd urge, listeners as well is, stick to what you know, get really good at the things you do, and not try to be everything to everyone, because
No,
you'll drive
Jake.
yourself nuts. The quality will go down.
Well,
So
you'll
yeah,
stress yourself out too, right?
exactly.
There's nothing worse than being in over your head with someone else's money in your pocket, you know.
Indeed.
Yeah, no, that's excellent advice. Thanks for sharing that, Jake. I
Of
appreciate that.
course.
Hey, you're a marketing guy, so briefly, what's something that you see? I'm sure you witness a lot of other contractors. What's something contractors still tend to get completely wrong about marketing today? What do you think are some of the biggest misunderstandings about marketing? Now think small contractors, maybe even smaller than your company. What are they misunderstanding? What are they getting wrong most of the time?
I would say that they assume that to do social media, you have to be, the most personable and outgoing person in the world. I think there's a connotation, of the quote unquote influencer out there that's this
Yeah,
very giddy up and loud and, in your face person. And to be able to do that, you need to be, super extroverted. That's not the case. I truly feel even some contractors or service-based businesses, and obviously I follow a lot of accounts and also want to support other local businesses myself, and whether we get ideas from each other or just support, I think that's a misconception or connotation that yes, you have to be loud and in your
yeah,
face to do well. And that's not the case. People just want to see behind the scenes. They want to know who they're working with prior to working with them, right? And I think
absolutely.
as a
Yeah,
local service-based business, if that's, for those listening, that you're in that spot and you're trying to get some more local reach, document
yeah.
your day to day. And it may sound like an annoyance at first or an extra step, but even for yourself to look back on and learn from yourself, but share that
It's a
journey with
trust
people.
builder too, Jake? Like it very much
Exactly.
builds trust. People get to know you. People, they become comfortable with you without even realizing it. I think that's the
Right.
great benefit of social media, right? I
Yes.
I used to have it in my business. People would call me and I actually had people say to me, we feel like we already know you, right?
That's the most rewarding thing I will tell you, John. I've had families come in here and they'll be like, Jake, I feel like I know you. I've been
Yeah,
watching your videos. I feel like I
I
know you.
know.
This is like, we feel like we're friends already. And I'm like, we just met, 10 seconds ago, but, uh, I love you too,
And
And
I think,
so,
Jake, I
yeah,
can say on behalf of both of us, and what you've said is true. You don't need to be this electric personality. I mean,
no,
look at, I prove that. You probably prove that. I don't know you that well, but neither one of us are, incredible standouts as far as personalities, I wouldn't think. Um, but we're normal people who aren't afraid to display display who we are, right? And I think
sure.
that's a huge encouragement. Like, I prove every single day that you don't have to be an incredible personality and incredibly outgoing all the time. Ask my kids. I'm boring old dad, right? But I'm doing what I do, just being me, right? Um, let's talk about beyond misunderstandings and mistakes as far as marketing goes in general, what pitfalls can do you see a lot of contractors making when it comes to growth? Think of small contractors in their first 5 or 10 years. What do you see? And maybe even go back into the archives of some of the stories that your grandfathers told you about starting out, maybe mistakes that he made. What would you say are some of the top most common errors that contractors make trying to grow their businesses?
Sure. I think, I do feel the example earlier is still going to be the best of, trying to take on things out of your scope just to get the job or just to show, prove to yourself or to a customer or whatever that, you can take on anything. And it's not the move. Absolutely. But on top of that, I would say, just the biggest mistake that I think contractors can make is over promising and under delivering, right?
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
for example, I have two things. I think that's number one, or I guess number two, aside from taking things out of your scope, out of that are not in your scope. But yes, over promising, under delivering, because it's easy. Someone's like, I need this tomorrow, or I have a birthday tomorrow. And if you can't get it done, it's better to be honest. And I
Yeah.
think it's easy to try to say, yes, I'll do it and figure it out. But if you truly have a good sense of your business and your logistics, your team, your backlog, and you're overpromising something, it's going to bite you at the end. So I'd say being transparent and not taking on more than you can chew. It starts with being organized and knowing your bandwidth before every call comes in, right? You should know for every
Right.
call that comes in right before,
Yeah.
you should know exactly where you're at. So you're under promising and over delivering. So
Absolutely. Yeah.
um, that is super important um, on that front. But also, I think ultimately just being just and also not trying to get taken advantage of, right? I think a lot of customers will come in and say, oh, I would, I'll promote you, or, give me a deal because of XYZ. And I think being very confident in your pricing, at least for us, right? We work very hard to be at a competitive price point with that's in line with the value and the work that we do. And we work very hard on that. So when someone comes in and asks for discounts, it's like, hey, look, we've worked very hard to come up with this pricing. It's competitive and it's in line with the value we bring. And if you're looking for a discount,
Right.
you don't go into a restaurant and say, you know what, that steak, I know it's $50, but I'm going to tell my friend about it. So how about I do it for 40? No, you don't, right? It's
Yeah.
a
What
it's a
what is it
respectful.
about contracting where people negotiate? Like you wouldn't do that anywhere else. You don't do
No,
that when you go to buy a suit at Neiman Marcus. Like it's whatever,
right.
like
Or
it's
I bought a steak, so I should get a free dessert. No,
yeah, like
you know,
it's a weird, we're still part of the barter system. And I think there's a lot of, if I can, again, to my audience, like have more self-respect. I think all the things you just mentioned as those challenges, Jake, come down to a simple thing. Fear and desperation, right?
mhm,
I'm down to my last customer, right? I need the next one desperately. And I think desperation can sometimes cause all those things, and we act out of fear. And I think what your company has proven is the value of playing a long game, right?
yep,
Doing things for the long-term effect, right? Never sacrifice your reputation for the short run, right?
yep,
Because when you take on work that you shouldn't take on, it's going to hurt your reputation. If it's beyond your core competency, likelihood is you're going to screw it up and get a one-star review,
right.
right? You're going to be years getting over that,
Absolutely. Yeah, and
right?
I think I would add to that, you're the customer that comes in and asks for all the, deals and a sale, and that's going to be your biggest headache of a customer. And I joke but I urge my friends, now being in the space for a while, and that's like, hey, if you have a plumber coming over, to an electrician, or an HVAC, whatever it may be, right? Be respectful, be nice. I
Yeah,
promise you, they will go above and beyond for you, because
yeah,
it's the customers that come in and come in with an ego, and that we owe them something, and we have no idea who they are, and that we owe them something. It's those people that I don't necessarily want to bend over backwards for. So my advice is, yes, if you know your value, have your backbone, stand by it, and
absolutely.
that's some huge advice I would give. And it's easy early on to,
Yeah,
you know, to do that and barter, but I promise it's not worth it. And there's always the next job, and just know your value, 100%.
no, absolutely. I agree with that. I always remember, I think we should, what do you think, Jake? Maybe we should do a course, like a consumer course, like how to be a good consumer to
Yeah,
contractors, right?
I would love
Like
it.
because it actually, I remember before I was a this is going back a long ways, back when I had my marketing company like 25 years ago, when before social media, I know that, we had a toilet plugged, and my best friend and his family were coming from West Virginia to visit us for U.S. Thanksgiving. They were celebrating in Canada. Little house, one bathroom, the toilet's plugged. I'm not a plumber. I can't get it unplugged. I don't have a snake. We call a plumber up. The guy comes in at night, rushes in to get us the job done. He was a busy day. He's a plumber I'd used maybe once before. And he came in and he threw his snake in there. Boom, it flushed. Great, it works. What do I owe you? He says, you don't owe me anything. And I reached into my pocket. And now remember, this is 25 years ago. And I
Sure.
pulled out a $50 bill. In Canada, by the way, those are red. Okay. So they
Okay.
show. I pulled out a $50 bill. My wife's face, her jaw almost hit the ground. Like, why are you giving him $50 when he said it didn't cost you anything? Right. I had to kind of coax him to take it. He took it. And my wife said, why would you give him $50? He said nothing. Like I said, because the next time I call a plumber and it's him and I need him in an emergency, I want him to remember that $50 and I want him to come. Right.
Sure.
And I didn't do anything wrong. He offered to do it for free. I never asked him to do it for free. But I think if people understood how contractors feel about that arrogant attitude of I'll fleece the contractor and every contractor's out to scam me, because I think that's where a lot of it comes from too. There's this fear of contractors, and some contractors have given the rest of us a bad name. Um, the old joke that 90% of contractors giving the other 10% a bad name. You've heard that one before, right? It's not quite
Yeah.
like that, but I think that's part of it too. So, and I think too, the longer you're established and stand for the things you've said, Jake, I think you'd probably agree. The less common that kind of behavior becomes in your consumer demographic that enters your location or enters your orbit, if you will, right? Because
Right.
they know the guy on 41's been there forever. Okay. And he's a respected member of the community. He's not there. There's no fear of you guys, right? You're established. You've been there forever. You've been there forever for a reason.
Sure.
And there's a mutual respect that comes with that. But a lot of it comes from you guys having done exactly what you said. So let's talk about mistakes, regrets. We've all had a few. Maybe you haven't been in the business long enough to make any doozies yet. So maybe you can tell a story about dad or grandpa. But what would you say is one mistake that either you made early on or that maybe you heard your grandpa made early on, that taught you the most? Like if you could go back to day one and change one thing, what would it be?
Ooh, a tough one. Ooh, that's a good one, John. I think I'll take a spin on this and a little bit different of an angle. And I would say be a bit kinder to myself. I think to
Oh,
be,
I like that.
transparent. I
Yeah.
think, and then not to say, again, I'm human, right? I think,
Yeah.
it's different when people come into the showroom, but, when you're on the phone, and I think people, forget or, assume or are used to not dealing with, maybe they're dealing with a call center, right? And it's outsourced, abroad. And not to say that's okay to still lay into someone or may have you. And again, I'm mindful. Everyone has bad days, and but I think I early on I took everything so personally.
Yeah.
Whether it's losing a job or a customer being upset or whatever it may be. In this type of industry, things happen, right? We're
Yeah.
human. Uh, we're not computers. We're doing hard work and things happen. It's a bit different. So I would say, the biggest mistake I did was I let so many things kind of build up and be so hard on myself, and this didn't go this way or that way or what I expected and some of that just comes from setting high expectation, and that's not a bad thing, right? Because
Right.
you as an individual are always going to be your biggest, cheerleader, but also your biggest enemy, right? Because you as
100%.
a person want to do the best for yourself, and whether you're in a family business. And I think early on, right, I wanted to show to my family that, forget my last name or anything of that. I belong here, and I think I tried early on to do a lot too early. And coming into an established business, right? You hear the old saying, if it ain't broke, don't fix it.
Yeah.
I think I wanted to, I had so many ideas growing up. Oh, we should do this that way. And I think I later found there was a lot of low hanging fruit, that I implemented and wanted to do. And once I started to get to that, and now 3 years in, those crazy ideas are a lot more digestible and
Right.
more listened to.
Yeah.
So I'd say whether you're starting into a family business or starting your own company, whatever it may be, you're trying to prove to your team, your family, whomever, uh, take your time. Don't try to rush everything and try to show all that you can do today. Really learn the business, learn yourself, right? Learn your strengths and weaknesses and of yourself and the business before you try to start changing everything. And
Right.
obviously, you could have great intentions, right? You're trying to make everyone better around you, the company better, but if you outpace yourself or run yourself into the ground, get some sleep, learn from those things. You can burn yourself out, and I think that's easy to do. And when you're younger and you may not have responsibilities, whether you don't have kids yet or you haven't started a family, whatever it may be, you're going to have the most energy when you're younger and when you have the least amount of other responsibilities like real life. Forget about work, like real life family stuff. um, I think that's my biggest advice or learning lesson is yes, to pace yourself, be kind, and take it one day at a time. That's all.
That's so good. I think I feel like we're just two buddies talking now at this point. Jake, finally,
We are buddies, John.
I know,
Absolutely.
I know. So it fits. I used to say this, and it hit me. I remember almost can almost remember where I was when I first had this realization. You ever have one of these epiphanies where you just, oh man, I'll never see. I can't unsee this.
Sure.
And what hit me was this because I loved our business. We were a family business, okay? Very different than yours. We had three generations in the business, but we weren't a third generation business in the sense of succession, right? We had kind of all my father-in-law and I had the business together, and my sons worked for us. And I remember one day thinking, boy, yeah, does everybody love what they do as much as I do? Like, I enjoy this. Like it's so much fun. I just get excited about getting up in the morning, right? Like I'm the kind of guy that I'm typically a 4:30, 5 a.m. rise and like in bed by 8:30, 9 o'clock, like the old man that I am. But I loved what I did. But then I realized once the stress had kind of piled up, there's a danger in that. Because you love it so much, you want to do it all the time. And you don't take breaks because you don't realize how stressful it is for you, right? So I don't know if maybe you haven't experienced that the way I did. And it was very hard for me to say, you know what, as much as I'm enjoying this, I need to stop and go for a walk or go sit on the beach or go play a round of golf or do something that isn't work because the stress of this, and I can't say that enough either to my audience, get enough sleep. I could do a whole show on the importance of getting enough sleep in what we do.
hmm No,
Huge
I can
factor.
I can absolutely tell you, John. Yes, I know I'm still early in my career, but I've had those moments where whether it was a friend or significant other may have you to tell me, look, you're burning yourself out, Jake, right? You got to focus on yourself. And obviously, I'm not going to sit up here and say I have it all figured out.
So what do you
Each day
do?
is,
What's your release? What do you do to
yeah.
unwind?
I love golf. Big
Yeah,
golfer. I'm a big foodie, so I love to cook and smoke barbecue and that's a release. My family, so family and friends, golf and barbecue, man. That's
yeah,
that's
good.
that's my, that's my thing
Well,
for
work to
sure.
live, right? Don't live to work, work to live.
Exactly, exactly. And
And
yeah,
a
and I
lot of
and I tell
us,
myself, yeah, and I tell myself, look, this is at the point in my career, right? I have the least amount of responsibility at this time, family wise, and I want to put the work in now so that yes, when I do have children of my own and things get a little bit crazier, that the foundation and growth has come and also and I think to stress too is yes, I am third generation, but I am so grateful that first and second generation are still in the business. My grandfather still comes into the office 86 every day. my
Wow.
uncle, my
Good for
dad.
him.
They're in their 50s and 60s, and it's I'm very lucky to still have them. So I want to make sure while they're still here and around that I'm absorbing as much knowledge as that I can and learn from their pitfalls and their wins. And not many people have that. Sometimes family businesses are just left there, and the next generation's up to go, and they haven't had the ability to learn from them, on a day-to-day basis. And I have that, so I don't take anything for granted. I'm grateful for what's been built in front of me, and now it's really a goal to make sure that I honor them and carry that on. But it starts with educating myself on the history and where we've come from, and give them a clear picture as to where I want to go, and that
Right.
support means the world to me. So that's that.
Well, it's an amazing thing to think about, and I have to tell you, I think about the weight that's on your shoulders, and
Sure.
at the risk of presenting this to you in a way that maybe you haven't thought of, although I can't imagine you haven't. I think about your grandfather starting. His two sons get into it. They ran the business together for a while. They still, in a sense, do run the business. Do you have another heir apparent? Or are you the only heir apparent to Fenceworks? Are you literally going to be the guy on 41 and the only one? Or do you have
That's it.
other siblings
That's
or
it.
others? That's
That's
it.
it, man. I'm
So
it. Yep, it's
the
mine.
real challenge is this, and it sounds like you're on the right track. They say third generation businesses is where the businesses end. That's where they fall apart. And the reason for that, I have a lot of relatives that are entrepreneurs and are in business, and they talk about this and how not to fall into this. And apparently the reason for that, it's not a given that it's going to happen, just statistically. The second generation appreciates the sacrifice of the first generation because they got to see it, right?
Right.
Like I have cousins that know what it was to have empty cupboards and empty fridges when their dad was struggling in his business, right? My kids experienced that in the past, right? You know how tough it is. By the third generation, you're debt-free company by that point, and things are a little looser, profits a little better, you've got it figured out, and it's easier to take things for granted more, right? And perhaps not be as careful. And
Sure.
it's a real the family business dynamic. My hat's off to you because it's a lot of people think, oh, I wish I was, in that situation. It has its own challenges, doesn't it?
Oh yeah. Oh yeah.
You know,
No, I think that is no, John, I'm glad you brought that up. I think that's a huge misconception. I think
yeah,
people assume, oh, you're just working with your family. It must be easy. And separating what a lot of people consider, church and state is a very common term,
yeah,
where, between the confines of the office, it's, that's my boss, that's my partner. And then when we leave the office, whether it's, Sunday brunch or around the golf, we're back to family. And again, it's hard and it's easier said than done. And things happen where they get mixed, and we're at dinner and business comes up, because when you love something, especially as much as my grandfather does, that was his life for over 60 plus years of his life,
yeah,
has been this business, and he doesn't know anything else. And I admire that, and obviously I want to, and he'll tell you, I wish there was more balance, and we have those regrets. But and then some people, that's what they love. And ultimately, yes, I want to, and I've already absorbed a lot of that, that initiative and that love, and it's become my life and a part of me, and I want that. But at the end of the day, yes, you need to have that ability to, yes, close the computer, turn the phone off, be present. It's easier
yeah.
said than done. But yeah, that's exactly right.
I'm gonna bounce out, just springboard off something that you said, you've kind of hinted at, and I'll as the senior of the two of us here, this will probably sound like a little bit of advice to you, but it's really
Sure.
advice from my audience. When I was really young, which seems like a while ago now, in my 20s, um, just a young salesman here locally in the community, one of the things, I don't know what made me do it, but I started this practice of once a month finding an older local business person that had been around for a long time, had a reputation, and taking them out for lunch and picking their brain and getting their
Hmm.
advice, right? My father was actually a school teacher, so he didn't have a business bone in his body, or doesn't have a business
Sure.
bone in his body. My father's still alive. He just wasn't entrepreneurial, right? That all came from my mother's side, right?
Hmm.
And so I would do that. And I have a number of older mentors that took me under their wing when I was like 21 and just poured things into me. And if there's anything I can encourage the young guys and girls in my audience is find people like that you respect, that you look up to. You say, hey, when I'm 70, that's where I want to be, and learn how they got there. And you have that built in with your grandfather, right? So take advantage of it. Take full advantage of it. It's such a valuable thing. And what I'm starting to realize now that I'm in my 50s is that it's not very long and those people are not going to be in our lives anymore. Most of those mentors, by the way, that I can think of when I was in my 20s, they're now gone.
Sure.
In fact, they're all gone because they were in their 60s then, right? So,
Sure.
yeah,
Sure.
take advantage of that there's the wisdom of the old is I know we say, oh, we're in a world of technology, those people don't understand it, but principles that work are timeless,
Sure.
right?
Oh, absolutely.
Your
Absolutely.
business proves that. So,
Absolutely. Yeah, you say, the saying goes, right? You are the average of the five people you spend the most time with. So,
yep,
surrounding yourself with people that have been there, and it's shoot yourself in the foot if you think you have it all figured out. I don't care how old you are, you should
yep,
constantly be learning, and there's always someone to learn from. And not to say you take on everything. Some things you got to take with a grain of salt. Maybe it's not the same vertical, it's not the same exact experience, but I think listen more than you talk. It's an art to listen more than you talk, and
absolutely.
that is absolutely a valuable lesson I've learned as well.
Still, God created us with two ears and one mouth for that reason, right?
Amen. There
You
you
know,
go.
and you know what, Jake, is another proof of what you just said that I've sat here for, I don't know how long we've been talking, but you're younger than me. Again, I almost said your age. Not that you care, I know, but anyway, I digress. Um,
I'm 30. It's okay. I'm
there you
30.
go.
There you
He said it. I
go.
didn't say it.
You're
Uh,
good.
don't blame me. You're a little older than my kids. I've learned a lot through this conversation. And this one of the
Likewise.
reasons why I love doing what I'm doing is because I learned so much in the different connections that I'm able to make through this. So my hope and prayer is that my audience here has been blessed by this today, and I hope it's been an encouragement too. Jake, I want to thank you for coming on the show. I know we're a show in our infancy, and we haven't hit our stride yet. I understand that, but listenership is growing, and thanks to all our listeners for tuning into this. And I hope my conversation with Jake from Fenceworks in Chicago has been a help today. That's what this show is here for. Um, Future programming notes, we do have some more interviews that we're lining up with contractors around the world, and it's very exciting, the possibilities that are here. Make sure you're following us on Instagram, Growthscapes, ending with a Z. And little plug, we do offer consulting, and I do consulting work, and we can also look at your online marketing, your online presence, and give you some help with that. So there's many other things that we will be helping you with down the road, recommendations of services that can help you grow your business and so on and so forth. But for now, we're just here to talk about what it's like to be a contractor and how we can all help each other succeed and grow. So with that, I'm going to sign off for this episode. Thanks again for listening. Jake, thanks for joining the program. I really appreciate it.
It was an absolute honor, John. Look forward to staying in touch. Thank you for having me.
Very good. Thank you. Over and out. God bless.